They were doing Desire of the Elms. And those being present at those rehearsals was...
John Huston wasn't just one of Hollywood's great directors. He was also one of its great storytellers. With a career that stretched over 4 decades, Huston crafted films that blended adventure, philosophy, and raw human emotion. But for him, the measure of a great film often came down to the people on screen, the actors who could transform words on a page into something alive.
Well, I had a house, the style of which was cut to, I suppose, more the last century than this. It became very expensive.
In a dimly lit screening room, Huston once admitted that when he thought of the actors he most admired, the list wasn't about fame or glamour. Instead, it was about those who brought truth to their performances, who could dig deep enough to reveal vulnerability, strength, and contradictions all at once. He explained that his list was personal, spanning decades of filmmaking and friendships. These were the people who surprised him, challenged him, and sometimes even overwhelmed him with their honesty. In his own words, they made him feel immensely proud and pleased. From screen legends to his own father, Huston's choices reveal not just the actors he loved working with, but the qualities he believed defined true artistry. So let's step into Huston's world and count down the 7 actors he cherished above all. Number 7. Ava Gardner. John Huston first crossed paths with Ava Gardner while working on The Killers. Even before she became one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, Huston sensed something rare in her. He later recalled that there was a basic fundamental thing about her, an earthiness bordering on the roughneck, even though she was at pains to conceal it. That raw quality, half hidden, half undeniable, made Gardner a magnetic presence both on and off screen.
These two try to put the story together. They have different points of view about it, needless to say. They get very entangled with each other. And so there's this concurrent story. You're finding out about her life, but you're also watching this relationship play out.
Huston would eventually direct her in The Night of the Iguana, 1964, where she delivered one of her finest performances. In the film, Gardner plays Maxine Falk, a hotel owner in Mexico who becomes entangled with Richard Burton's defrocked priest, T. Lawrence Shannon. One of the most striking moments comes during a stormy confrontation on the veranda. Maxine lays bare her loneliness and longing, challenging Shannon to stop hiding behind guilt and accept the love right in front of him. Gardner balances toughness with vulnerability, turning what could have been a melodramatic role into something painfully real. For Huston, that was the essence of Gardner, sensual, earthy, and brave enough to show her flaws. He once admitted she was intriguing and confessed with his characteristic bluntness that he was completely unsuccessful at making a conquest. That honesty reveals how deeply she unsettled and fascinated him. Gardner wasn't simply a beautiful starlet to Huston. She was a complex woman whose very presence demanded authenticity. Directing Gardner allowed Huston to explore themes of desire, redemption, and human weakness with a partner who instinctively understood those emotions. Her performance in The Night of the Iguana is remembered as one of her strongest, in part because Huston gave her the space to play with both strength and fragility. Gardner's inclusion on Huston's list says much about what he valued in actors. It wasn't polish or perfection that impressed him. It was the willingness to let real, messy humanity shine through. Ava Gardner did that effortlessly. Number 6. Albert Finney. When John Huston cast Albert Finney in Under the Volcano, 1984, he knew he was asking an actor to step into one of the most demanding roles of his career. The film, based on Malcolm Lowry's novel, follows Jeffrey Furman, a British consul in Mexico whose descent into alcoholism becomes both a personal tragedy and a reflection of a collapsing world.
Hopefully one of the better ones where they would do a play every month and stay there for 2 to 3 years or whatever and try and start to learn my craft. I did want to do that.
For Huston, it was the kind of story that demanded an actor who could surrender to chaos, yet still keep the audience transfixed. Finney delivered exactly that. One of the film's most harrowing sequences takes place during the Day of the Dead festivities, where Furman staggers through crowded streets haunted by guilt, paranoia, and hallucinations. His estranged wife tries desperately to reach him, but he is already too far gone, lost in drink and despair. The scene is unsettling not just because of its realism, but because Finney refuses to soften the character. He allows Fuhrman's self-destruction to play out in full view, unvarnished and painful. Huston admired this courage. In a 1984 interview, he said that he and Finney spoke in a kind of codal communication. There was little or no directing required. What Huston meant was that Finney had an instinctive understanding of the material. He brought what Huston described as a wealth of invention, surprising the director with choices that expanded the film's emotional depth. Huston didn't need to mold or control him. He just had to give Finney the room to create. That kind of collaboration was rare. Many directors would try to rein in an actor who strayed from the script or pushed boundaries. But Huston thrived on unpredictability when it came from someone he trusted. With Finney, he knew that every impulsive gesture, every slurred line, every haunted glance was grounded in truth.
So there were quite a few guys there who've done quite well, over the years. But you don't see it in those terms. Of course, when you're young also, you and a few of your classmates think that you're the only ones who can do it,
Their partnership highlighted Huston's belief that great performances emerge not from rigid control, but from a director's willingness to trust the instincts of a gifted actor. Finney's performance in Under the Volcano went on to earn an Academy Award nomination, and Huston often cited it as one of the great pieces of acting he had ever directed. It was not polished in the traditional sense, but it was alive, human, and heartbreaking. It does raise a thought, though. How much should a director guide, and how much should they simply let an actor go? Can too much control stifle the very genius that makes a performance unforgettable? Number 5. Elizabeth Taylor. John Huston rarely handed out unqualified praise to actors. He could be blunt, sometimes even scathing, about performances he felt missed the mark. But when it came to Elizabeth Taylor, his words were unusually generous. Reflecting on his time directing her in Reflections in a Golden Eye, 1967, Huston said simply, "I can only say good things about her. I discovered that more than a great beauty and a personality, she was a supremely fine actress."
That fighting with somebody you love and are really sure of, and if you're really sure of yourself.
The film itself was controversial. Adapted from Carson McCullers' novel, it delves into themes of repression, infidelity, and hidden desire. Taylor played Leonora Penderton, a restless army wife stuck in a suffocating marriage to Marlon Brando's emotionally repressed officer. In one particularly tense dinner scene, Leonora pushes her husband to the breaking point, while her attraction to a young soldier simmers beneath the surface. Taylor's performance balances sharp defiance with simmering passion, making her character both sympathetic and infuriating. Huston admired how Taylor could inhabit that complexity without ever appearing to act. She brought a raw emotional truth to Leonora, exposing the vulnerability hidden beneath glamour and confidence. Huston, who had spent much of his career working with tough, hard-edged performers, was struck by how Taylor fused star power with genuine depth. For him, she proved that beauty didn't have to be a limitation. It could be a mask hiding more dangerous, conflicted feelings. Taylor's presence also elevated the project. Reflections in a Golden Eye was a challenging film to make, its themes pushing against the boundaries of what audiences were comfortable with in the late 1960s. Yet with Taylor at its center, Huston had an actress fearless enough to confront the material head-on. Her commitment gave the film an emotional weight that might otherwise have collapsed under its own strangeness. For Huston, the collaboration reaffirmed his belief that acting was not about surface, but about truth. Taylor could project glamour on the red carpet, but in front of the camera, she stripped that away to reveal unvarnished emotion.
I think it'd be very hard to go back to movies, actually, because you sit around so much and you don't have the sense of continuity or the flow. You sit around most of the day and you, at the most, do 2 or 3 pages.
That's why Huston held her in such esteem. She embodied his idea of what a supremely fine actress should be. It makes you wonder, how many stars in Hollywood history were underestimated because their beauty distracted people from their talents? And how many, like Taylor, fought to prove they were more than just an image on a poster? Number 4. Peter Lorre. When John Huston made his directorial debut with The Maltese Falcon, 1941, he assembled a cast that would define the film noir genre.
It was to direct. I wrote The Maltese Falcon from the Dashiell Hammett book. And the original intention was to have George Raft play it, but
among them was Peter Lorre, the Hungarian-born actor with the distinctive eyes and voice who played the role of Joel Cairo. On paper, Cairo was a secondary character, a fussy, slightly sinister man trying to outmaneuver private detective Sam Spade. But in Lorre's hands, the role became unforgettable. One of the most memorable moments comes when Cairo attempts to intimidate Spade with a small pistol. His soft-spoken manners and nervous charm almost make the scene comical, until Humphrey Bogart's Spade easily disarms and humiliates him. What could have been a forgettable encounter instead crackles with tension because of Lorre's layered performance. He managed to blend menace with fragility, turning a stock villain into something oddly sympathetic. Huston later called Lorre one of the finest and most subtle actors I ever worked with. He admired how Lorre could bring depth to even the smallest parts, observing that beneath his innocent facade lay a Faustian worldliness.
Bogart, to my secret delight, was substituted. And read a few days after I got back to California that Bogey had recanted.
Huston admitted that he often didn't realize how powerful Lorre's work was until he watched the rushes. In other words, Lorre's acting was so natural, so unforced, that it only revealed its brilliance when viewed with the detachment of an editor. That subtlety was what set Lorre apart. In an industry that often rewarded bigger, louder performances, Lorre understood the power of understatement. He could shift the tone of a scene with a glance, a nervous laugh, or a hesitant pause. Huston valued this enormously. He knew that in a film like The Maltese Falcon, where dialogue and atmosphere mattered as much as plot, an actor like Lorre could transform the mood without drawing undue attention to himself. Lorre's inclusion on Huston's list reflects the director's appreciation for actors who could enrich a story without dominating it. For Huston, cinema was a collaborative art, and he recognized that films are often defined not only by their leading stars, but by the character actors who give texture and nuance to the story. It raises an interesting thought. Do we sometimes overlook the true brilliance of supporting actors because their performances are designed to blend in rather than stand out? Huston never made that mistake with Peter Lorre, and neither should we. Number 3. Marilyn Monroe. For many directors, Marilyn Monroe was a symbol of beauty, glamour, and star power. But for John Huston, she was something much deeper. He worked with her early in her career on The Asphalt Jungle, 1950, where she played Angela Finney, the mistress of a crooked lawyer. Though the part was small, Huston recognized something rare in her performance, something that went beyond surface allure.
She used to go into a huddle with her between scenes. But at that time, I had no idea of what she was eventually in store for.
In one striking scene, Angela tries to cover for her lover after a jewel heist has gone wrong. Questioned by the police, she attempts to mask her fear with charm, but the cracks show. Her eyes dart nervously, her voice trembles just enough to betray her anxiety. What could have been a forgettable role became quietly poignant because Monroe infused it with genuine feeling. She wasn't simply playing a character, she was revealing herself. Huston later said of Monroe, "She wasn't acting. She was not pretending to an emotion. It was the real thing." He believed that she reached into herself to bring emotions to the surface, making her vulnerable and deeply touching on screen.
A good part of the time we didn't. Yeah. And the movie was apt to get ahead of the writing. In fact, I used to stage scenes, and then Truman Capote and I would go down and write them.
For a director like Huston, who prized authenticity above everything, that honesty set her apart. He also saw in her the fragility that lay beneath her image. While Hollywood often treated Monroe as a glamorous commodity, Huston recognized her as a serious talent capable of great dramatic work. He found her very touching and vulnerable, words that reveal both admiration and empathy. In his eyes, Monroe wasn't just a star. She was an actress who could channel real pain, joy, and longing into her roles.
A year and a half after the war.
Yeah.
That's the way I remember things, only consecutively. And
When was the war? Quick.
This perspective foreshadowed the later stages of Monroe's career, when she began to take on more challenging parts that highlighted her depth. Unfortunately, her struggles off-screen often overshadowed her artistry. Huston, however, never underestimated her. He knew that behind the blonde bombshell exterior was a performer with the capacity for extraordinary emotional truth.
she did. Read beautifully. I remember she, if you recall the role in the film, she played most of the part on a sofa.
It's a bittersweet reflection. Would Monroe's career have taken a different path if more directors had valued her depth rather than her beauty? Could she have become one of Hollywood's greatest dramatic actresses had she been given the chance? Huston's words suggest he believes so, and perhaps he saw in her what the industry never fully allowed her to prove. Number 2. Humphrey Bogart. Few actor-director partnerships in Hollywood have become as legendary as John Huston and Humphrey Bogart. Their collaboration began with The Maltese Falcon in 1941 and spanned classics like The African Queen and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. For Huston, Bogart wasn't simply a star. He was the embodiment of what it meant to be a serious actor.
I felt that Betty was, in a sense, going to school with Bogey. He worked with her and taught her how to use her voice and rehearsed with her, taking a great load off the director, may I add.
In The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948, Bogart played Fred C. Dobbs, a down-and-out prospector consumed by greed. The role gave Bogart the chance to step away from the tough, cool heroes audiences knew and show something darker. One unforgettable scene finds Dobbs staring into the campfire, paranoia flickering across his face as he contemplates murdering his partners for their share of gold. The madness in his eyes, the desperation in his voice, this wasn't the suave Bogart of Casablanca. This was a man undone by greed, and Huston captured it in all its raw intensity.
Hour a day, and they received guests, and this was observed right up to the finish. And he was too weak to even be lifted down the stairs. There was a dumb waiter, and he used to crowd himself into this dumb waiter and come down to the first floor.
Huston respected Bogart not just for his performances, but for his attitude toward the craft. At Bogart's funeral, Huston delivered a moving eulogy in which he said the actor had become increasingly aware of the dignity of his profession. Actor, not star, his work most seriously. That distinction mattered to Huston. He valued Bogart because he didn't chase glamour or publicity, he chased truth. Their relationship wasn't always easy. Both men were strong-willed, and Bogart could be as stubborn as Huston was demanding. Yet, the friction often brought out the best in them. Huston gave Bogart some of his richest roles, and Bogart, in return, elevated Huston's films with performances that were layered, complex, and deeply human. For Huston, Bogart represented the kind of actor who understood that vulnerability was just as important as toughness. Dobbs' breakdown in Sierra Madre worked precisely because Bogart wasn't afraid to strip away his cool exterior and descend into madness. Huston admired that willingness to risk his image in service of the story. It's telling that Huston never described Bogart as merely a leading man. To him, Bogart was proof that great acting wasn't about looking good on screen. It was about revealing the truth of human weakness and strength. That's why he held Bogart in such high esteem, not only as a collaborator, but as a friend. And it makes you wonder, did Huston shape Bogart's legacy more, or did Bogart shape Huston's? Perhaps the answer lies in the magic they created together, where director and actor pushed each other toward greatness. Number 1. Walter Huston. At the very top of John Huston's list was a choice that was both inevitable and deeply personal. His father, Walter Huston. Their collaboration in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948, remains one of cinema's great father-son achievements. John wrote, directed, and adapted the film, while Walter delivered the performance of his career as Howard, the grizzled old prospector. Howard is the voice of wisdom in a story about greed and paranoia. Where younger men like Fred Dobbs, Bogart unravel under the weight of ambition, Howard stands apart, tough, pragmatic, but also strangely joyful.
A small child when I was watching it was the appearance of my father in the film. And only second to that, the appearance of my grandfather, who I never knew in real life, who died some 2 years before I was born. So it was really a way of getting to know my grandfather, although by the time I'd seen Dodsworth, much later, I realized that my father was not that little old prospector. He was, in fact, a great actor.
The defining moment comes after a violent struggle leaves the gold lost to the wind. Instead of despair, Howard breaks into wild laughter, dancing on the mountainside as the dust scatters. It's a scene that turns tragedy into bitter comedy, capturing the futility of greed and the resilience of the human spirit. For John, that performance was more than just great acting. It was a moment of profound pride. He later admitted that every time he watched his father's dance of triumph, goose flesh rose on his arms and the hair on his neck stood up. He described himself as immensely proud and pleased when Walter won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, knowing that their partnership had produced something historic.
Fox. And the winner is Walter Huston.
Thank you. Bob said you can't take any credits. I'd like to take a credit myself. Many years ago, many years ago, I raised a son, and I said, if you ever become a director or a writer, please find a good part for your old man. He did all right.
What makes Walter's role so powerful is its honesty. He didn't play Howard as a caricatured old-timer, but as a man who had lived long enough to see life's ironies up close. His laughter wasn't just a plot device. It was the culmination of decades of wisdom, hard luck, and survival instinct. That kind of truth could only come from an actor utterly committed to the reality of his character. John Huston often admired actors who surprised him, who could peel back layers of humanity on screen. With Walter, he didn't just find that, he found family. Directing his father wasn't simply a professional collaboration. It was an emotional union of two artists shaping each other's legacies. It's hard to imagine any modern filmmaking partnership that carries the same emotional weight. A son writing and directing a story that earns his father an Academy Award while capturing a performance that still resonates decades later.
Steve McQueen in Bullitt and Bogart in this movie and John Huston in this movie and stuff, they'd be so different if other actors did them. It didn't mean they wouldn't be good, but they wouldn't quite have the brilliance that they have in this.
Perhaps that's why, out of all the actors Huston worked with, Walter stood above the rest, not only as an actor, but as a father who shared in his son's greatest triumph. Looking back at John Huston's list of favorite actors, a pattern begins to emerge. He wasn't drawn to those who simply embodied glamour or commanded the biggest salaries. What impressed him most were performers who brought truth to the screen. Actors willing to expose vulnerability, complexity, and even weakness. For Huston, great acting was never about artifice. It was about humanity. Ava Gardner gave him sensuality laced with loneliness, a rawness that made her unforgettable. Albert Finney offered instinct and invention, a creative energy that needed little directing but left a lasting mark. Elizabeth Taylor showed him how beauty could coexist with depth, transforming a difficult role into something layered and true. Peter Lorre revealed the quiet brilliance of subtlety, elevating supporting parts into essential pieces of a film. Marilyn Monroe embodied honesty so naked it could be painful, reminding Huston that emotion is more powerful than image. Humphrey Bogart, his most frequent collaborator, showed dedication, humility, and the courage to risk his star persona in the name of storytelling. And finally, Walter Huston, his father, gave him not just a great performance, but a moment of profound pride. an Oscar-winning triumph born from family and artistry combined. Huston's reflections remind us that acting, at its core, isn't about fame or perfection.
Aging himself, actually, it was Robert Edmund Jones. They were doing Desire of the Elms. And those being present at those rehearsals was, I think, probably the biggest influence.
It's about the ability to make audiences believe, to inhabit emotions so fully that they feel real. The actors who impressed him most were those who carried that truth within them and dared to show it on screen. It leaves us with a simple but enduring thought. The films we remember most are rarely defined by spectacle alone. They live on because of the performances that cut through artifice and touch something raw and human. As Huston himself admitted, these actors made him feel immensely proud and pleased. Can there be any greater legacy for a filmmaker than that?